So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to your KITS Mobile Webinar Wednesday. So today we'll be looking at part 2 of ways to optimize your face-to-face client meetings with KITS. Julia will now brief you on what we'll be covering.
So for today's webinar, we're going to be going over acknowledging key skills to help close those sales quickly. Also, a deeper look at some different KITS basic features, different than what we did in part 1, and also ways to improve your scene builder skills.
All right, so let's go ahead and let's get started. This is going to be the second part of the short series where we look at the key skills you need to improve when you're face-to-face with your client. Now, knowing what works best for you, how to best utilize KITS to finding a solution to your client's needs will ultimately help you close that sale quickly. All right, so let's go ahead and begin. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open up the project that we started on last week. And this was the layout that we created based on the skill sets that we talked about last week. So what we want to do is we want to continue this. And the first key factor that I want to talk about, and which I actually mentioned the first time last week as well, is what you really need to know to being successful. And the number one thing here is product knowledge. Okay, so this is something that I repeat to all the clients that I normally work with, knowing how to specify the manufacturer's product, know where to find it, and also how to use KITS to actually navigate through the catalogs to finding that using the search function of KITS. That's all key to your success to closing that sale quickly, especially when you're face-to-face with your client. All right. So again, what you can do is I'm just going to quickly pop open one of the catalogs here. And for this one, I'm just going to quickly open up HAN. And you can see here we have all of HAN's catalogs that we've synced to our iPad. Again, what you'll see here, or what will be displayed in the manufacturer's catalog section, are only the catalogs that you've synced to your iPad. Okay. Remember, using the catalog subscription screen is a way for you to manage the content that's available to you. All right. So if you need to learn more about that, you can visit our Knowledge Center, or you can contact KITS support to inquire about some key features like the catalog subscription screen. Okay, so here, just like any of the spec tools that you normally use, let's say 2020, the navigation hierarchy that's created by drilling through the actual manufacturer's catalog list is the same. Okay, so we have that type of synergy that we've created so that, again, your work is effortless and it's seamless when you work from using KITS as your visualizer to using the other spec tools to specify in your project. So here, if I just quickly tap on HSN seating, you can see that it drills down the catalog. I can go into steel seating. I can actually go down through the submenu to find all my items. I can narrow down to exactly what I'm looking for. If we're looking for nucleus, I can tap on that. It now breaks that down. Let's go into work chair mesh, or work chairs with mesh backing. And then now I can drill down into the thumbnail. You can see that what I have here is the catalog or the item model number, HN1, and I have a nice graphic, also a brief description of what that is. And then I have the other one, which is HN1, which is actually based on fire code upholstery. So again, this is a great way for you to view your catalog by model number, and then finding a graphic to represent what that model number is. So it's a great way to learn what a lot of these letters and numbers mean. You know, especially if you're learning a new product, you could use this tool as a way to learn more about the product that's in front of you. Okay. Now, the second thing that you could also do is you could also define your search by searching for anything in particular. Here, again, what we can do is we can type in the word task and search for task. And you can see what KITS begins to do is it begins to search for the word task that's either found in the model number description or the short summary description line for typicals and manufacturer catalog items. Here, what we want to do is we want to narrow that down to finding catalog items only. You can see what KITS begins to do is it drills down and it reduces the results by looking at only catalog items and not typicals. Here we can further that by creating a price range that we want to look under. I'm going to say 500 to 1500, and again, kits will adjust the results based on the criteria. Now that I know what I'm looking for here in this case, because we are using some Steelcase product, I'm going to tap onto Steelcase. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and tap on Steelcase seating. Let's go into work chairs. And what I want to do is go into think seating. And you can see, as I keep doing that, you can see whether or not it actually drills down into your search. So again, it's a great way to help define what you're looking for. If you see no matches, what you can actually do is you can also change your criteria to matching what you need to look for. And every time you start to increase that, what you can do is you can see. Now, what we're resulting in this case is that the think chairs here don't have the word task in it. So again, what we can do is we can go back. That may not be the correct one that we're looking for. Let's go into the leap chairs. And again, you can see, again, we're finding the results. So what we're showing you here is that understand what keywords the manufacturer actually uses, because it's really important in order to find the correct chair that you want to use, or the correct item that you want to use. Every manufacturer uses the descriptions differently, so knowing the manufacturer that you're searching for is important, as well as knowing the item and how it's described is also important. So now that I know that this is the this may not be the right criteria I'm looking for, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and I'm going to search for the HON items. Here I'm going to tap on seating, steel seating, and what I want to get into is ignition seating. Once I get into ignition seating, I know that it's a task chair that I'm looking for, so I'm going to tap on task chair. And now you can see how quickly my results drill down into a minimum results. So that's the best way to utilizing the search function is, again, knowing how to search and knowing how to use the search function to find the particular item that you're looking for based on the criteria of manufacturer, the manufacturer's lingo. So it's important to understand how the manufacturers use certain description words. Remember, some manufacturers may write out upholstery, some may write out just UPH. So understanding how this is key to really using the search tool as a granular search method. All right. So again, every manufacturer is different, and best way to do is look at the manufacturer's catalog sets and understand how they use the short summary description to find your items. Okay. So let's move on to the second part of the webinar. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into the project. Here's the project that we created last week. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move this out of the way, because the first thing I want to talk about is the floor grid. Now, in case you guys are new to KITS, you may not know that KITS has a default floor grid size of 30 feet, 30 feet by 30 feet that's provided for you every time you create a project. And then for those of you that are familiar with it, this is going to be a refresher. But knowing how to utilize the floor grid is actually key, especially when you need to space plan your project, and especially when you need a quick way of dimensioning the layout within the space. The floor grid that you see here on my screen, this represents that 30 foot by 30 foot the default floor grid that we create, and every square in this floor grid represents 1 full square foot. Now, we all know that there's no way of dimensioning or using any kind of tool to dimension your layouts in KITS, so this is the best way for you to utilize how to actually use the floor grid to creating the project based on your client scope. Okay. Now, the floor grid can be changed according to that client scope. Here, if you go into project settings, that's that cogwheel at the top right corner. What you get is basically a slew of different settings that you can go through. The first one is the floor grid, and you can see here the first option in floor grid in the floor grid settings is the actual control key, and that's the controller. So if you want to turn your floor grid on or off, all you have to do is tap on that control switch, and blue means that the floor grid is displayed. white means that it is not displayed. Okay, so that's a way for you to turn it on and off. And then you could also change the actual size of your floor grid. Here again, you can see that it's 30 feet by 30 feet. I'm actually going to keep those dimensions, but if you want to change your floor grid size, all you have to do is tap in the correct box, make the change, tap into the other one, make the change there as well. Okay, so let's go back. And now what I want to do is go into Plan View and just set this up using the actual floor grid. So what I'm actually doing here, and you can see, is I'm lining up the furniture based on the actual squares. So again, just as a visual reference, you can see that this seating arrangement created by the Credenza storage units is actually 3 feet. Okay, because what I can do is I can count the boxes that are side the unit, and because I have 3 squares there, that indicates that that's 3 feet. Again, I can also use that to calculate the length of it, and here you can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 feet. So I can tell you that this unit here is a dimension of 12 feet by 3 feet. Okay, so that's a key way of using the floor grid whenever you're actually working with your client. All right. So again, you can utilize that floor grid space to also give you the circulation points that you'll need to create between furniture items. So here you can see that between this storage seating arrangement, I also have 3 feet of space before it hits the actual workstation. So again, that's a way for you to space plan your project. What we're actually doing today is, other than the floor grid, we also want to take a look at the multi-select feature. So that would include the drag selection as well as the multi-tap item selection. So here you can see that currently my items are set in a group. What I want to do is I first want to ungroup this. The third part of this, we're going to actually take a look at grouping and ungrouping as well. And what we get are these blue bounding boxes, which we talked about last week, that now surround my items. So to understand how the selection process works, here I'm going to tap anywhere on my screen. So right now I've deselected all my items. If I tap on any individual unit, you can see that I get a blue bounding box or a blue box that surrounds that item. That indicates that that item is right now is separate. It's not in a grouping. And if I were to move that item, I move that individual item only. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to show you how you can utilize the multi-selection tool, especially when you're working on intricate layouts, layouts that may have components that are underneath tabletops. What's the best method to use to selecting all those items? First key thing I want to actually show you here is if you need to ultimately select all your items in the space, all you need to do is double tap the select button. Once you double tap that, what that does is it selects every single item that's in your scene. No matter whether it's on the floor grid or not, it will recognize any item that's actually in that scene. You can see how quickly I was able to do a full selection on that, and I can move that layout as one now. Okay. Now, moreover, what I want to do is I want to do 2 different selection methods. I want to do a drag selection, and I want to do a multi-item selection. And the reason why I want to do the 2 is because there's a difference as to when you should use one or the other. Okay, so obviously a drag selection tool, anything that you anything that's caught within the marquee box that's created for the drag selection will get captured in that selection. Okay, so here I'm going to go into Plan View. And just so, again, if you're new to kits, if you turn on the hand gesture sign, that's just right up here, you get this nice movie ribbon of gestures. If you flick to the left, you can see the gestures you need to learn for the drag selection as well as the multi-item selection. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to do this gesture here first. So I'm just going to leave that ribbon open just so you can see what the gesture is doing, and then we're going to actually replicate that as well. So the reason why I want to do the drag selection to capture this part of the layout first is because I have key components that are support components that are actually underneath the tabletops. And instead of having me tap one item and do a multi-item select and having to try to navigate the camera so that I can look underneath the actual table, what I want to do is simply enough go into plan view and use the drag selection method as indicated. So I'm going to place my left thumb on the select button here. I'm going to tap and hold. I'm tapping and holding that particular icon because it's highlighted in gray now. And just as in the gesture, I'm going to place my right finger at the top left of the actual layout, and I'm going to drag diagonally across. So you can see that I'm creating this magenta marquee box. Anything that's caught inside of that selection area is going to be selected. Once I let go with my right hand, any item underneath is now selected. So I let go with my right hand, let go with my left hand, and now I go into 3D view. You can see that I now have those items selected. Okay, so that's a quick way of doing a multi-item selection. Now, if you need to quickly select any particular loose items, you could also do the multi-select. And this requires for you to turn on the action by tapping on the select button this time. I'm going to tap and release. You can see that the icon now turns blue. And any particular item I select in the scene builder will now get added to a selection. Okay, so you can see simply enough, I was able to do that by just tapping on all those items. Okay, and the reason why I did that is because here I don't have any components, support components, that are actually inside holding the items together. You can see that now I'm moving it as one. It actually is moving the entire layout, okay, of that particular storage seating area. So that's a great way of utilizing the tool and that selection feature. What you do need to know, though, is once you're completed selecting the items using the multi-tap select, you need to make sure that you turn off that feature. Because if you leave it on and you tap on another item, that item too will get added to that selection. If you tap on an item and you want to deselect it, all you have to do is tap on that item again. Okay, so you can deselect any items at this point if you don't need to keep them part of your selection there. All right, so again, just make sure that you turn off the selection area or the select that action once you're done with that feature. All right, so here what I want to do is I want to replicate this layout, and I'm going to add another one of these two-person workstations, and I'm going to attach it to this panel system. So there was a great question last week with, what if I want to actually take this layout and replicate it and place it here? What do I do with the panels that are also created in that selection? So let me show you how that works. First, what I want to do is I want to group that item. Okay, so part of the series here, I'm just going to turn off the hand gesture. Part of today's webinar is understanding how grouping works, when to use it, and also when ungrouping or how ungrouping works whenever you use it on a grouped item. So first thing we want to do is we want to group both these layouts separately and together. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to go back to plan view, tap and hold my select button, drag select over the first layout, let go with my right hand. I got my first grouping there. I'm now going to tap on group at the bottom left corner, and you can now see those items turn red. Those are now grouped together as one. If I tap anywhere off of the screen, tap back on, you can see that those are now connected. Now I do have a green bounding box and a red red boxes over the grouping. Again, we covered this last week in the webinar, but that green box, what that indicates is that's the current item that you're selected on in that grouping. So the important thing to understand here is that anytime you want to connect something to that particular item, or if you want to connect this grouping to another set of items, the green box is your lead item, and that will and that's where the snap to function will work. So I'm actually going to go through this method here. I'm actually going to go through the process here to show you what that all means. So I'm just going to go back. We have that one group item there. I go back to plan view. And now I'm going to drag select over here. We're also going to group that together. So now I have two separate groupings. And now what I want to do is select both. Now you may be wondering, why am I actually selecting, why did I do that individually as separate units? Let's just group that first together. Here I'm going to tap off one of the items. I'm going to tap now onto one of the items, and you can see that the entire layout is selected. Now the reason why I group those two items separately is because anytime I ungroup the items at this point, or ungroup this layout, if I ungroup now, it still maintains the individual grouping of the layout of the two separate layouts. That way, if I need to edit the scene any way I want, I have as much play as possible without having to ungroup all the items separately again. All right, so this way, again, I can maintain the original grouping order of those particular items. Okay, so that's basically how that works. So, you know, as a best practice, anytime you create any particular layout and you're creating a scene, it's always best to group that particular cluster that you've created. And then if it needs to belong to a larger layout, then you can also group that together. But this way, anytime you ungroup, you can maintain the original characteristic of the first grouping so that you can move the items freely together and you don't have to move each individual item as you're going along. Okay, so what we want to do at this point is we want to duplicate this layout, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to add it to the back side of this particular section. So we're going to tap on ungroup. Nope, sorry, we're not going to tap on ungroup. We're going to tap on duplicate. So we now have two separate layouts. Okay. I'm now going to go and rotate that. And simply enough, what I can do here is I want to attach this layout to the back of this here. And you can see that I can easily do that by tapping on one of the posts and using the snap to function to making sure those snap together. But we obviously know that this is incorrect, because now what I have is a duplicate of that backing. So what I want to do is I need to remove one of those backs. See here, whoops, what we can do is, let me just undo that for a second and move that out of the way. And since we have these two units separate, I can go ahead and ungroup this layout without having to affect the other grouping. So you can see why it's important to group separate layouts. Now all I need to do is go into plan view. And here, what I want to do is I want to remove all the panels that fall along the back side of this layout. I can tap on each individual item, tap on each individual tile, or what I can do is simply enough tap on select, do a drag selection, making sure that I'm only selecting the items I want to remove. Once I let go with my right hand, and now with my left hand, let's go to 3D view. You can see how I quickly selected only the back panel of that particular layout. Here I'm going to go ahead and tap on remove, and now we have that backside exposed. Let's go back to plan view, and now do a drag selection there. Let's group that together. Let's do another drag selection over this layout. Let's group that together. So now what I can do is I can freely move this layout as one. Let's go into 3D view. And what I want to do is I want to make sure that I'm selected on one of the items that's going to attach directly to this post. So in this case, I want to make sure that in this particular grouping, I am selected on the actual frame that you can see that's highlighted in green here, because that frame is going to attach to this post. Okay. Now again, this post may not be the correct post. Obviously, I might need a T-based post. In this case, it's probably a finished corner. we're going to just skip that over there. I can easily replace it if I want, but what I'm going to do here is just show you what you can quickly do when you're with your client is now drag this across and use the snap to function to making sure those items snap together. Okay, once they're snapped together, let's go into plan view. You can adjust it any way you want. So here you can see we're slightly off. I'm going to go back into 3D view. And again, depending on how finicky you want to get with this, you can keep moving it until it matches up exactly how you want it to. But the one thing that you do have to remember as well, what we're doing here for the client is creating a graphic. They're not going to see the deficiency of something that minimal. Because again, if I go back to the 3D view, you can see that by the graphic alone, you wouldn't see that there's any issue regarding this particular layout. Okay, and now that I have these two layouts created, let's go back into plan view, and let's do a complete drag select over that layout, and now group that together. So now you can see that all my components are connected together. I now have them all nice clustered as a grouping. I can now move them as one whenever I'm actually working the layout. If I need to add anything and I don't want to readjust where everything's sitting, everything's grouped together, and I can place it anywhere in my scene. Okay, once that's done, again, what we can do is if you're client-facing, you can utilize the actual frame of the iPad and create a quick rendering using the first option for your client. And that's pretty much it, guys. That does it for today's webinar series. So again, I want to thank everyone for joining me. I want to thank Julia for moderating every webinar, and especially the KITS community for joining us every Wednesday.